I think I've started to value more things than I've realized. But if the first thing that's coming to my mind right now, y'all, is just the food and the music and the happiness. Um,
Yes.
Definitely the happiness around being together with friends and family.
Right. Right. Thank you, Andrea. Um, did we lose Emily? Is she coming back? Do we wait? What do we do?
I would just go ahead. I think
Okay.
I'll share the recording with her. So
Okay.
if she chooses to come back, then she can follow along with what she missed.
Okay. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. And, part of the reason why I wanted us to talk about this is because this is, and, brings us into the room. Like we talk about the things that we like about the folks we work with. And these characteristics that we're talking about, right? Like resiliency and resourcefulness and just this ability to overcome success or the drive to overcome success that is present in the queer refugees and immigrants that you're also coming in contact with, right? And so kind of knowing that they come with their own resources and you're a support to them, that partnership is what is gonna make them be successful in the country, right? Okay. What are our learning objectives today? We're going to keep it very simple. We've only 2 hours time here, and it's a very small group. So I would love for us to have this conversation be as conversational as possible. And today, in the first section, we're going to talk about we're going to learn about what is LGBTQI, who are these individuals, and what is their culture. And then in the second part, we're going to learn about how do we as Inspiritus, how do we as refugee serving community create safety and belonging for these folks, okay? Here are my small requests for group agreements. And we can change them, we can add our own, right? And so at the core of it, it goes to respect, right? So we are going to respect each other who is in the room today, because all of us, right? Born in Ghana, born in Nepal, born in US and lived in Honduras, Alabama. We all have very different upbringings, and the differences is what makes us wonderful and beautiful, right? And so that also means that we will have difference of opinion. We have different experiences that we've had. And so when we talk about our experiences, let's let's use I statements, right? And so what that means is if I want to say something about Nepal or Nepali culture, I can say in my experience in Nepal, XYZ, right? In my experience, the gay men are X, Y, and Z, right? And so when I say it in that way, I am talking just about my experience of this culture, this community. I'm not saying gay men are like this or in Nepal. Like, I'm not claiming other people's reality. I'm just claiming my reality. And so when we share what we are thinking about today, let's be sure to use I statements, right? And then I know, Andrea, you are driving, and if you get to a place where you can turn your camera on, I would love to see your beautiful face, as with Musa. And then also, like, the biggest thing is listen, and especially if you disagree, right? It's easy to listen, like, part of the reason I want the camera on is like, I want to see how what we're talking about sits with you. If it sits well with you, I know you're going to like shake your head and I'll be like, okay, they're getting it. But if you disagree with me, I can read your body language as well. And that's an opening for us to have a conversation about it, right? So what's going on? It didn't sit well with you. Why didn't it sit well with you? And we can explore that together. Another thing, there are no stupid questions. Again, we come from very different backgrounds and experiences. So, of course, none of our experiences are going to be the same. So, there are no stupid questions. And we're here to learn. I am learning also along with you. Leanne's learning too. So, as facilitators, we're not here trying to give you our knowledge. We're sharing what we've learned. And I know that in interacting with the community that you interact with, you have experience that you're going to share and you're going to teach us. So it's a back and forth learning thing. Okay. And please put your questions in the chat. I think between Leanne, me, and Sarah, we're monitoring those and we'll absolutely take care of them. But if you are feeling like, I don't know if I want to put it out there for everybody to hear my question, but I really wanted to ask this question, I also have put my phone number there. Just text it to me and I will read that question and respond to it anonymously. So feel free to copy that phone number if you want to. And then also take care of yourself, right? Take care of yourself, which means if you need to take a break, but please come back. We would love to finish this conversation. So please come back. And then each of us we're bringing some knowledge to this discussion. So we will support you. We will learn from each other. And then please speak up those ouch moments, like where, I might use a word or I might misgender somebody and it goes ouch with you. Like you're like, oh God. But a lot of times we are trained not to speak up those ouches, right? So I really encourage you to speak up about it. Anything else that you guys want to add? And I think it also goes without saying is, what we talk about here today, if you share any personal details, either about you or about another person, please know that it has to remain in this room, just that this is the confidentiality, right? But what you do is stories stay here, lessons go, right? So you can take the lessons with you. You can share the lessons, but please don't share people's identifying information if that is shared today. So what else?
Yeah, and we are recording so that other people can watch this. So if you have something that you want to tell us and I need to pause the recording or whatever, I'm happy to do that, or we could stop a little bit early and if we want to have other things we want to say without the recording.
Thank you for reminding about the recording. Okay, so we've been through this. Leanne, do you want to talk really briefly about who Pride in Mother Tongue is, who Compassionate Atlanta is?
Yes, I would love to. I'm just closing the door because I have a dog that likes to bark when I'm on Zoom. So Compassionate Atlanta, it's part of a global movement centered around compassion. And we are all about just uplifting the good. Uplifting the good. And we respond to the asks of the community. So in doing that, one of the things that has come to our attention is that there really is no space for LGBTQ refugees and immigrants. And so I've been a part of the LGBTQ community in Atlanta for a long time. And I've also been working for refugee serving agencies. And these two don't necessarily connect. So we started something called Pride in Mother Tongue, which is for many new coming refugees. And some of them are coming with that as their status that has allowed them to come here as a refugee or an asylee. And this was Pride 2 years ago. We had a wonderful time where we walked in the Pride Parade, and Atlanta Pride has given us some funding to continue the services that we do with Pride in Mother Tongue.
Cool, thank you. And you can follow us on Instagram, and our handle is @Pride in Mother Tongue. Okay, so the picture on here is also from one of our gatherings that we had. And yeah, and this is Legacy Park. Are you guys also in Legacy Park, Sarah? No. You're too big for that.
We had one of the houses when we were using for a family.
Yes.
I think for a year, but not anymore.
Okay. So let's talk about the alphabet soup, LGBTQIA. QIA. What do they stand for? Oh, stop moving forward. So lesbian, L is for lesbian. Gosh. And G, so lesbian is usually a term that is for women, right? Women, people who identify as women. And we're going to get into what identify is versus orientation is in just a quick second here. But L is for lesbian, gay is for men. And so lesbians are women identified people who are in relationship, sexual relationship with other women. Gay is a term for men who male identified who are in relationship with another person who is also male identified, right? Bisexual is a person who is attracted to both people who are male, but also people who are female. And then transgender are folks whose gender identity does not match the organs they have, sexual organs that they have. Okay, and we're gonna get into it. So give me just a second, okay? And queer is a term that is kind of, it's more widely used right now. It used to be a slur. It used to be an epithet that people have reclaimed it back, right? And queer can be basically people, they are, it's a political term. It's a term, especially now, because there's a lot more folks who are gender non-conforming or non-binary, and it allows us to, you know, kind of have an easy, quick word to say, this is where I fall. I don't, basically the politics around it goes, I don't fall in the are you a man, are you a woman gender binary that these folks who call themselves queer, and I refer to myself as queer, we are trying to reclaim this space to say, why do you care who I sleep with at the at a very basic level, right? And so that, and then intersex is a category that is in between male identified and female identified. For folks who are intersex, they are born with both male and female genitalia or sex organs. Okay, and we're going to talk about intersex also in a minute. And then the A in the LGBTQIA stands for asexual, meaning people who are not attracted to either kind. They live their life in a different dimension that does not have, you know, sexual attraction is a component. And it can also mean ally. An ally is another word for friend, helper, supporter, advocate. And so the fact that you guys are in this call, learning about this, means that you guys are interested in being allies to this community of people, right? So any questions so far? Okay, all right. And pronouns, okay. Earlier we said, you know, what is your pronoun? And some of us said what our pronouns are. And what it is when it's basically asking you, when I refer to you, how should I refer you is basically what you're asking, right? So I can say, this is Sarah, and she is a volunteer coordinator at Inspiritus, right? That came out so quickly, right? Because I know Sarah is female presenting, and she also confirmed earlier that she goes by she, her pronouns. So now my visual cues of Sarah and she confirming, now I'm comfortable to say Sarah is a she, right? But there are people in our world who don't necessarily conform to our visual experiences, right? Like sometimes you're like, huh, was that a man or a woman? Like who, what, like you have thought that thought, right? So that, and so you currently, the pronouns that are in use obviously are he, she, he, his, she, her, right? And the one that queer folks are bringing up, especially the ones who are like, I do not believe in this gender binary being only two, right? Of you have to be a man or you have to be a woman, right? So the transgender folks and the queer folks are really pushing all of our understanding about gender, sexuality, and they're saying, why should I be either a he or a she? And so they've come with the term they, right? And so now if Sarah went with, sorry, Sarah, I'm going to pick on you today. If Sarah said their gender, their pronouns were they, them, then the way I would talk about Sarah is Sarah works for Inspiritus. They are a volunteer coordinator. They are a wonderful resource to the community. They have dogs, right? So that's how we would talk about it. And yeah, I'm going to stop here for now. Any questions you want to ask? Anything you want to add, Leanne?
No, I was, for the first time, what came up for me is binary. Well,
Yes.
I've thought about the binary, right?
Yes.
But we talk about everything on a spectrum.
Mhm.
And, being from South Africa, but growing up in the United States, it's like, am I South African or am I American? Right? And does there have to be that binary? And so it's probably a little bit more, more culturally normative to say, oh, you're an immigrant. So do you have to decide? Do you have to decide if you're South African, or do you have to decide if you're Nepali or you're an American?
And
Like,
when do
can't
you
you
do,
be
when do
both?
you
Or,
become one? Yeah.
And so I think that same thing is with that spectrum of people who are like, actually, I don't fit into that category. I don't fit directly into either one. So I'm gender neutral, or the other way around is people feel like this is how I feel and I actually don't feel right in my body and I'm transgender, which I know you're going to get into, but it just
Okay.
made me think of the binaries that we tend to always want to have that
Yeah.
are not really okay in our lives. We have the whole spectrum.
Yeah, and I think, the other part I think about it is, as human beings, like even as a young child, like, a newborn child, what our system, our brain wants to do is sort things so that we can make sense of what is happening around us, right? We have done that. We have done that since we were a tiny baby. We have learned to recognize the face of your mom because that is love, that is food. And if you pass the baby on to a new person, they'll cry because they're like, who is this? I don't know this, right? And so it's a mechanism that we all have inherited. It is our evolutionary thing that we want to sort things out. We want to get to where we need to go, and we're like, let me figure this out. So that's just a sorting way that we have to just figure out our world. And so now this that I'm showing you is a little bit complicated on the picture here, but stick with me and we will go with it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start with, thank you, I will. Okay. So we will start with sex. Okay. What is sex? It is something that is biological, right? Okay. Okay, biological sex. And what does that mean, right? Biological sex, and again, who determines it, right? So when you look at think about an adult human female and an adult human male, there are body parts like breasts for women. Men don't have breasts. Women have, genitals that is not visible. Men have genitals that are visible, right? And then other sex characteristics. Men have beard. They might be more hairy. Their voices are deeper than women's voices, right? So these things are, again, categorically, to categorize, these things are easy to categorize, right? But think about, do you know anybody who doesn't have facial hair? Like men who don't have facial hair? Yes, you do. Are there men who wear their hair long? Yes, you know them too, right? Are there females who wear their hair short, like me, right? So, and so there are people who meet the stereotypical definition of what male is. And then there are people who meet the stereotypical definition of what female is, right? And the rest of us, the world, we exist in the middle, right? And in our expression. And so I'm going to come back to this. And so basically, biological sex is what you are born with. You're male or female, right? But then who determines whether you're a male or a female? At birth, what happens? What happens? Like, let's say your mother gave birth to you in a natural way, and a doctor picks up the baby and then says what?
It's a boy.
It's a boy or it's a girl,
Girl.
right? And what is the doctor basing their assessment on the genitals that they can see, right? And so again, sorting easy to do, but we also know that there are people who are born with both male and female body parts and sexual organs. Okay, there are, and we'll watch a quick video about that in just a second, because that group is one of the group that have had way too much discrimination that they have experienced, right? And their bodies have been used by science without their permission, right? And so we will go into that a little bit. So in terms of sex, okay, we're just talking about biological sex. Again, think about it in a spectrum, and it always helps to think about it in a spectrum with, like, you know, male being one side, like, you know, you look like a man, your body parts are in conformity, they match, right? And on the other side is female, and then there is intersex kind of in the middle, okay? And then one quick interesting thing is that, you know, we know a lot of women who are like experiencing PCOS. PCOS has been very directly linked to being intersex. And so whether or not like your body is presenting female or male, there are internal systems that are more in the spectrum. Okay. All right. So that was our biological sex. And now identity is, like you see in the picture, it's pointing to the brain, right? Identity is, who are you, right? Who are you? Like, what is your identity? Like, right now we talked about our ethnic identities or the countries that we were born in, right? That is how they think about it. That is like, do I think I'm a man or not, right? There's a bunch of us who are like, yeah, I feel like a woman. And yeah, my body parts also agree. Good. That makes life easy for you, right? But there are people for whom the way their body looks, the way the organs they were born with, and the way they feel is different. And that's where a lot of transgender folks live, right? Transgender people they are born with one kind of body, a male or a female, but they do not feel right in the body, okay? And for those of us who feel right in our body, that is such a hard concept to think through, right? What do you mean you don't feel right in your body, right? The thing is, if you looked at yourself, right, and you're wearing female clothes, but the mirror is reflecting you back another gender, right? Like, think about it. If how you feel and what you see don't match, that's where the identity crisis comes, right? And what does transgender, well, before we get to transgender, those of us who feel like one gender and our biological characteristics also match, right? Those people are called cisgender, okay? And cis being on the same side, and so they are matching, right? Like both of them match. And transgender, as in, trans, just to take the trans part, is, transportation, right? Transatlantic, like these are terms that we have used. And so it's like, you are born with one thing, but you feel like the other thing, right? And so that's where the transgender thing comes in, right? And then on the left side here is expression, right? And expression is basically, how do you walk out into the world? What do you show the world, right? I was wearing something different, but I felt the need to wear something nice and put a necklace on because I was like, you're a facilitator. You need to look a little bit better, right? And so that is my gender expression, right? Like today I felt like I had to dress this certain way. Okay. I'll tell you another thing. Since 9/11 happened, and I'm not Muslim, but a lot of my Muslim friends, especially men, were targeted. And a lot of these folks had to go through very severe background checks and this, that, or the other. And also, they experienced a lot of hate and violence, right? So I am not Muslim, but you can't tell that, right? Like you can't tell that. And then what also happened is people who look like me, like brown people, were also affected. South Asian people were affected, right? And recently, during COVID, all Asian people were affected because everybody thought COVID came from China, right? And so people are ignorant. They don't want to accept the diversity of people and experiences. They don't know, they don't want to learn about it. And so people will assume something about you. So what I do, and I can't get it out of my head, is every time I'm going through an airport, I think to myself, what am I presenting here? Am I wearing too ethnic clothes that they might think I might be a troublemaker and pull me aside? Or so I think about those things, right? And for me, it's about how I interact with the police and the legal system here. But for a lot of transgender people, a lot of gender non-binary people, a lot of gender non-conforming people, and I'm using these terms just so that you get more used to it, is they feel what they feel. They want to show out. They want to walk out into the world in their best form possible, much like you and I do. But how they express and what people see are very different things, right? And because of that, and because there are ignorant people in the world who want to reduce the entire world into their very tiny worldview, they have been victims of violence, right? Among the LGBTQIA, transgender people and gender nonconforming people have been the ones who have experienced violence the most. They're the ones who are rejected by their families the most. And then also they are homeless a lot more than that. And police brutality too is much experienced in a much bigger number by transgender people than any other group. Okay. All right. So we've so far covered biological sex, your identity, and how you express yourself in the world. And now we're going to talk about attraction, right? Who gets your heart pumping, right? Who do you see and you go, okay, that's attraction, right? Like you're like, that kind of a thing. And so that is sexual orientation, what is your sexual orientation? Who are you attracted to, right? And in that, so here's more terminologies for you. People who are heterosexual, right? Hetero meaning that, you are either a male or a female and you're attracted to the opposite side, right? So a man attracted to a woman and a woman attracted to a man, you are heterosexual, okay? Now, if you are a female attracted to another female, or if you're a man attracted to another man, you are homosexual, one sex, right? Like same sex, right? Same sex couples or homosexuals, like those are new terms for that. And then what am I missing here? But Leanne, sorry, help me out here. What am I
Well,
missing?
I think you've got everything. I mean, really, this is if you're seeing this for the first time and you're
Mhm.
talking about all this for the first time, and you feel and you feel overwhelmed, then that's just like how everybody else is feeling when they hear it for the first time. So give yourself some grace, first of all.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and I would say, so there are all these things, and it does take a minute to figure out what they all mean, right? And so we can, as we go through things, there might be more opportunity to delve into them. But I think when I saw this person, genderbread person, it really helped me put things into place, right? So part of it is physical. I mean, the physical is your sex, right? What is physical? Then what is mental? Like, this is how I feel in my head. And then the heart, right? And then the expression, which is the external. So, just take a minute. And I guess if you have this recording or if you want us to send this to you, we can send this to you, because I think it's a way to break out, because there are a lot of definitions, there are a lot of names,
Mhm.
and they mean some different things. Oh, well, they obviously all mean different things, but like the part is, one's about love, one's about gender,
Mhm.
and we're talking about it all in the same space.
Yeah. And also think about, what do you, as volunteers or people who are interacting with queer folks who are coming through your program, what do you need to know versus what is none of your business, right? And like we said, like who you're attracted to, your sexual orientation, for the most part, is none of your business, nobody's business, right? Because like even think about in the heterosexual world, like you serve, how many clients have you served, male or female? And think about it, have you ever asked, like, who do you sleep with? Like, do you sleep with a man or a woman? Like, you've never asked that question. So in the course of you interacting with this person, offering services, help, being friends with them, more than likely there is no need for you to know what their sexual orientation is, right? But because of gender expression and because of gender identity, you will get into these kinds of conversations. So it's good to have the words, and also to keep your ears open to it and keep learning. Yeah. All right, Sarah, you said, how do you feel identify and who you're attracted to? So helpful in distinction. Yes, absolutely, right? When I came out to my dad, thankfully I had a very good coming out experience, and we will talk about what coming out is in just a second. I had a good coming out experience, and when I told my dad about it, his main concern was, but how are you going to have children? Right? And so that was such a great question, because that implied to me that he is not rejecting my identity, but he is just concerned for me, right? And another person who is dear to me has said, I'm afraid for your safety, right? And so people, you will come in interaction with them, and how you express concerns for them, their safety, their well-being, you already have the words for it. So the fact that, you know, their gender expression kind of throws you off, that should not prevent you from being the kind person that you are and being the resource that you are in their lives, right? Okay. All right, let's go to this. And feel free to keep posting questions on here, okay? All right, so so this video is going to be about intersex, and this is a movie, I think it's a full-length movie that came out in 2023, and it's called Everybody. I don't know where to stream it, but the person, and just a quick plug for this, is the person who made this movie is the same person who made the movie RGB, like about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RBG. So it's definitely quality material. Okay. Can you hear it? Can hear it?
No, can't hear it. What I
Okay.
think you might have to do is stop sharing and then start sharing again with sound, because someone had this issue earlier.
Okay. Also no. Okay. How about now?
Nope. Can't hear it.
Did you say you can't hear it still?
Yeah, I cannot. You have to stop sharing your screen.
Okay. Stop share.
Okay. Now
And then-
share again and then see if it comes on with sound. Or
Okay.
or if it asks a question about sound.
Sorry, hold on. Why can't I get out of this? Sorry, guys, my screen is not getting up. Okay, sorry, hold
You made
on.
it even worse.
I know.
Sorry.
It's not you, it's my phone. So I'm gonna do it.
No, I was on another call yesterday and people were trying to show videos and this kept happening. And so that was their solution. Let's see if it works now.
Is it better?
I can't hear anything. Does it work if we just watch it?
Yeah, I
Without
think so.
sound? Yeah, well, we have words on the bottom. Oh, I heard that a little bit at the very end. Um, I think I don't know if I saw this or if the one person is from Atlanta because
Yes, Saifa.
looks very familiar. They look very
Yeah,
familiar to me.
yeah.
And I think some of the stories that I've heard about intersex, and maybe they talk about it in that movie, is that the doctors, even when they know someone is intersex, so they see that this person, like they present with both sex organs. So the doctor makes a decision at that moment. Well, we're going to choose one over the other, not
Mhm.
considering what the child's life is going to be. And so they choose one. Let's say they choose female and they raise the child as a female, but then the child is like, wait a second, I don't feel right in this body. And they then come out as male. But it's the doctor has made the decision. And that film, I think, is a lot about doctors not being able to make the decision and simply letting that child grow and then decide what is the right way to do this. Is that
Yeah.
right? Have you seen it, Satya?
I have not seen it, but the person that you're referring to in Atlanta, they are one of my friends. They're a wonderful person. They do, um, I mean, they're an educator, so they talk about being intersex, and they're an activist. And what had happened this is Saifa, Sean
Yeah.
Saifa Wall is their name. So they were born with ambiguous genitalia, right? Ambiguous being not certain whether, yeah. And, I think and again, I don't have a boy child, but what I have heard is there's a lot of times where boys' testicles will descend later. And so you might see a penis, but you might not see testicles. Um, and the doctor feels the need to assign gender at birth, right? And why? Let's think about, why does the doctor feel the need to assign gender at birth? Is because up until now, we have organized our world in this binary, right? So now you're seeing different use for the same terms, right? And so a lot of times when if you are ever in a position to ask somebody what is their gender identity, like, do they go by male, do they go by female, do they go by transgender? Recently, one of the most neutral and appropriate way of asking this question is to say, what is your gender assigned at birth? Okay, it is a little bit of mouthful. It does take a little bit of practice, but that is a very non-judgmental and very neutral way of asking that question. The other way you could ask it would be, Sarah, are you a male or a female? And what are you? Right? Like, even if I put this in the nicest way possible and I said, Sarah, what are you? Right? You can hear the difference in my voice. You can hear that I am trying to be nice about it, but my question doesn't land well, right? But if you say, what is the gender that's assigned at birth? Then that gives that person to say, well, especially if they're transgender, right? Or non-binary, saying I'm not this or that, then that allows them to say, I was assigned male at birth, but I consider myself a female, or I consider myself transgender, right? And here are my pronouns. So it gives room for the person to say, this is who I am, and here's how I would like you to interact with me, right? And that is a basic human dignity that we offer to people in general anyway, right? And so it's not a terrible long stretch to get there. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a quick second, and I want to hear questions. I appreciate Sarah putting your questions in there. Musa and Andrea, I want to hear questions or thoughts.
I don't have any questions at the moment, but in thoughts, I couldn't follow with the video, so I'll definitely be watching it. But thoughts wise, what you guys, how you guys are breaking it down is perfect, especially when, you know, trying to understand and pass on kind of like the knowledge.
Yeah. And yeah, I'll send this whole slide deck to you all, and you can watch the video at your leisure and better sound. Thank you, Andrea. Musa, do you have anything you want to contribute at this time?
No.
How is this training going so far for you? Is this too much? You already know this. What is your experience so far?
It's normal.
Is normal? Okay, great. Great. Okay. Okay. So I wanted to pull this two pictures. And again, the picture on the right is Saifa and the other folks. These are people who are in that video that we just watched, right? And so we know now from having just seen them in a video where they talked about their intersex identity, we know they're intersex, right? But would you look at this person and would look at these folks and say, be able to figure out what their gender identities are? Like, what do they think in their brain, right? Again, identity is where you think, how you feel about who you are, not who you are attracted to, but who you are, right? And I love this person on the left. Their name is Alok Menon, and I will type it over here. In the chat, I've just typed this person's name. And if you don't follow them yet in Instagram, please do, because the way, like, I think this person is a prophet or something. Like the way they talk about and the depth of understanding with which they talk is incredible, right? Anyway, and they're also a transgender activist. And part of like this, Alok's picture is very provocative, right? You can see his beard, you can see they've put eyeliner, and they're wearing colors that are generally associated with female, right? And so it's a provocative person. And so if this was the person sitting across from you, how would you ask the question? How would you interact with them? And what would be some of your concerns about like not misgendering or saying something that's going to turn them off? How would you interact with these folks? What would be some questions that would come up for you?
I think if I were interacting with Alec, I would probably ask their pronouns first, because there's not a clear indication one way or another. So I would, with some people, I would probably be quick to assume and not think to ask. And with Alec, it would be very easy for me to go, I don't know how to refer to you. Why don't we start there?
Yeah.
But I think with the people on the right, it lends itself more to me not asking anything, because they look more stereotypical or more, you know, quote unquote normal, familiar. I think it's probably a better way to put that. And so I don't think I would have any questions.
Yeah. And I think then they would tell you that you might be wrong, right?
Right.
And so another like example of how you might navigate that situation is you could say, hi, I'm Sarah, I go by she her pronouns. What are your pronouns? Like, how should I refer you, right? again, very neutral, and you have offered yours first, right? And so it's like a handshake, right? If it's like a handshake or like a greeting, you say, "Hi, I'm Satyam. I go by," especially if you're like there are visual cues that you're like, I don't know. That's when you go, "I'm such and such. What pronouns do you go by, or how would you like me to refer you?" Right? How would you like to refer me? Yeah.
I did think of a couple of questions. It just took me a little longer to think of them. One is, transgender makes sense to me, assigned at birth, one gender, but identify as, or, relate oriented as a different. But is that different than like dressing in drag? Someone who dresses in drag, or is there, maybe each person's different, but comfortable in their assigned at birth gender, but then are dressing in a different gender in more of a performance type character, you know what I'm saying? And then also, would they switch their pronouns or go by they them pronouns, or would
Such
it?
good questions. That's
Such a
great.
great question, Sarah. I would say the especially the cross dressing definitely falls in the gender expression, right? And they're doing it for fun, they're doing it for performance. It feels a need in their identity to do this. But then they might go to work and be a completely different person, right? Yeah, that's such a great thing. And I don't know, well, I was gonna say, well, we do have this. I'm gonna use Stephen Igarashi as an example. So Stephen is a friend of ours, and he works at Atlanta Pride, and he's our connection to all of this as well. And he's been a great supporter. He is a man. He goes by he/him pronouns, and he's gay, right? So we know all these things about him, but Stephen also is a drag queen. And when they are in their drag queen persona, Stephen's name is Miss Terracotta Sugar Baker.
Yeah.
Yes, Terracotta Sugar Baker. And Stephen has been so in that drag, she is definitely a she.
Okay.
Right. So I've never asked that question before, Sarah, but that's a great one.
Okay, so most of my questions, or my two questions that I have, are around transgender. That's to me the hardest to wrap my brain around. Everything else for me feels pretty black and white or clear cut enough for me to understand. It just gets kind of muddled when the trans. So another question I have, and I often go back to this orientation versus or like identity versus attraction. And so I might have answered in my brain, but I thought I would bring it to the table and get you guys' answers. So if you have a person assigned at birth as female who has is either completed the transition or in transition to male, and so they identify as male, presenting as male, and then are in a relationship with someone who identifies as a female. In my brain, it goes back to, then aren't you essentially lesbian? And also how the person who presents and identifies and is all of the things as a cisgendered female with a trans male.
Yeah.
Like those, I just feel like my brain starts short circuiting when I try to think like that.
I would say great questions. I love it because that means you are actively working to incorporate this information. So I love it. And I will say to you, this is me when I was learning about like for me, I was in the same place as you were a few years ago. And the person who is in front of me, and Leanne knows this person, Sir Jesse.
Mhm.
This person is very male presenting. Okay. And they've always, like, I didn't know Jesse before Jesse transitioned, right? And again, just to clarify on the language, transgender people, because they don't, their body, the way their body is, whether they're in a male body or a female body, and the way they feel is different. And so a lot of folks, actually, I don't say a lot, I shouldn't say a lot. There are like, what do you do with it? What do you do with it? I feel this way. What do I do with it? Right. The response is also in a spectrum. Some people are like, yeah, that's who I am. That's what my body is. And I will, express the way I want to express, and I will, partner up with the kind of people I want to be with. Right. And so some live there. Some people will, change go through surgeries, do hormone replacement to actively change how their body presents, right? So you may have breast removal surgery, or you might have like, genitalia surgery, or you might take hormones that really changes how your body develops, right? Especially for people who are assigned female at birth, then your hormone would not have allowed you to grow facial hair. And right. And then, so some people go through, and so I think if there are people who are going through the process of actively changing their physical form to mesh with how they identify, right? If they're trying to do that, that process is called transitioning, right? And then that transitioning process can look very individualized and different for every person. It's based on what you want the end result to be. It also is dependent on whether you have the resources to do what you need done, right? Because gender and the surgery they would perform to match their identity with their physical appearances is called gender reassigning surgery, right? These things are expensive. They have to be done over multiple sessions and hormone replacement, all this. And a lot of the health insurances that we all get, they do not cover these surgeries. They do not cover hormone replacement. So then these are out-of-pocket costs for folks. And so if you have the money for it, you might go for it. If you don't have the money for it, you might break up your transition process into several chunks while you figure out how to get money, right? So yeah, and then so the thing that helped me, Sarah, when I had that learning space was I trained myself to shut my mouth first. And I said, whatever was going on in my brain, I let it play out because it needed to play out. If I shoved it to the back of my mind and it wouldn't have worked. I wouldn't have gone, through that hurdle. So I would let it go, and I'd like shut my mouth, and I would first run gender, she, her, or he, him in my brain, and until I felt comfortable to actually verbalize what I was thinking. So you are in a great place. You're doing the hard work. Keep at it. Keep at it.
Can I add something? There are other terms. There are other terms like pansexual. And pansexual is sort of like everybody. Like, you don't need to define it for me. I'm attracted to other individuals that may be all of the above.
Yeah.
So sometimes, we don't necessarily know until we fall in love with someone. Sometimes there are young kids that are at like 13, they say, oh, or you ask people and you say, I knew when I was 16, I was gay. Okay. I came out at 28, right? My partner came out when she was 46. Okay. And there were people that said, oh, I knew it all along. And you're like, well, how could you know it if I didn't know it? So I knew it all along is probably not the best thing to say to someone because you can't know it more than they know it. Okay. And the trick, I think gay has been out. I did a talk earlier today and we were talking about, some of the history, gay history. And it's been a while. Like one of the things we talked about was do you remember the show Will and Grace? Musa, you might not because this is like American TV, but it's been a while. Or Friends. The show Friends had the first lesbian wedding on it. I did not know that. Okay. But it was Friends that long ago. So gay has sort of been, and what does it take to say something is typical in our world? When we see it in the media, right? Or when we see it in our everyday. So kind of like going back to I know what I'm talking about, all this stuff, right? But going back to the pronouns for a minute, if we have name tags, right? And we put on our name tags our pronouns, so then it makes it a little less awkward to say to someone, hey, my name's Leanne. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. What are yours? Because it's just there, So practicing helps. And also the other thing is, remember when Satyam said, like we categorize people because it's just easier because we did that when we were children to see who our mom was or whoever was our caretaker was. So it's the same kind of thing. We go in our minds and we're like, so what do we call that? Is that like, is a transgender person and a gay, and then have they had the gender reassignments, or have they, the thing to remember with transgender, I would say, as with all the work that we do with refugees, right, is it's always what is their perspective, right? So we do this in our everyday work with refugees. What is their perspective? How do they feel about things? And it's the exact same thing when you're talking to someone who's transgender, whether a transgender refugee or just transgender US born. What is your perspective? So it could be that, oh, my body feels different than what my brain is. And maybe they're never going to have the surgery, but they're going to go by the gender that they feel in their head and feel that this is who I am. So like me coming out at 28 was like, oh my gosh, this is who I am. And so for people who are transgender, sometimes it's now we hear about a 5-year-old, right, who says they were assigned as a girl, but they say, nope, mommy, I'm a boy, or daddy, I'm a boy, or whoever, I'm a boy, right? Caregiver, I'm a boy.
And
So
then the person in relationship with the person who is trans, how do they often describe their sexual orientation? Would it be pan, or would it be bi, or I mean, I guess it could change, but what
it
is
all depends. It depends on the person.
okay?
Because now some people like, oh, maybe they don't like the term lesbian, so they call themselves same gender loving. Okay, so am I same gender loving? Am I lesbian? Am I queer? Like maybe they all apply to me, and maybe I say, well, that word lesbian when I was growing up was used in a certain way, and so I really like to call myself same gender loving. It doesn't. So they're all of these terms, and I think what we need to do is like fall back on where that person, where they feel most comfortable. So let them tell you.
And going back to the very beginning of the presentation, because in this instance, what I'm discussing is sexual preferences, which is none of my business. So I wouldn't actually be having this conversation, right? I would just be observing and
Yes.
curious and wondering, but curiosity is not the most important. My understanding is not priority in these situations. It's just something I tell volunteers.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's such a great connect, Sarah.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Sarah, I want to say one other thing. Have you ever gone to a restaurant, and because we work in this world of immigrants and refugees, like I have asked the question to someone who is Asian looking, where are you from? Okay. When I mean it in a like, oh my gosh, where are you from? Are you from a different country? Because
Yeah.
maybe I went there and I want to talk to you about it, right? And they're like, I was born in Alabama, you know?
Yeah,
And then I
right.
realized it's totally an oops, it was offensive, right?
Mhm.
So that's sometimes a little bit of the same thing. We want stuff for our own curiosity to make our minds answer questions when it
Mhm.
really needs to come from that person.
Thank you. This is really helpful. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna skip this reflection exercise because I just looked at time and we have only an hour left. Okay. Okay, so I also wanted to share just in data terms, right? A lot of people will say, well, why should I learn about this? Because there are no gay people in my community, right? And so this is data from Williams Institute, and they do this every 10 years based on census data and also American Community Services data. I can control my runaway thing. Okay, and so in Georgia, we are about 4.5% of the general population, 4.5 of Georgia's population identify as LGBT, right? Gay, lesbian, bi, and transgender, sorry. And then DC, Washington, DC is the only place that has 10%. Other than that, we're kind of in the range with the rest of the country. And I also wanted to put this information about age distribution, right? And I don't know how well you can see this, but the darker blue is LGBT individuals, and then the lighter one is the non-LGBT individuals in the age range. And so the first age range is between 18 to 24, 25 to 34. We're seeing higher number of people who identify as LGBT, right? So these could be the kids of refugees, or your volunteers who are much younger and fall in that age range. So as you are working, you got to kind of be also aware of how you interact with them, and if you are not interacting with them in a gender friendly or gender neutral ways, they might be like, I don't know about you or your organization, right? Yeah. And so look at this number on the age 65 and above. There's a story there as well, right? These are people who grew up in a time where having their gender expression express their personal gender expressions was not safe for them. These are the people who might have come at the heels of the Stonewall and the civil rights movement, right? And so at that time it wasn't safe for you to be out and gay, and so I think that might be reflected on here. And then we talked about transgender. Transgender is an umbrella term that is being currently used, and it includes a lot of things. And a couple of things that I will point out here is, people who have transitioned, now that we've kind of worked on that term before, some of them will be M to F, male to female, or F to M, female to male, right? And then there are, so drag, as we talked about, is a gender expression. Cross-dressing is a gender expression. Gender queers, I think they go expression as well as identity. And then two-spirited is a Native American term for genderqueer folks. Hijra is a term that I grew up with. And it was used in terms of cross-dressing mostly, but there is a Hijra community, a thriving Hijra community in India. And I'm also want to say about this third gender is also referring to transgender, but in Nepal, they have legally passed you can as third gender as something you can be. And so now in all the forms, all the things, you can select male, female, or third gender, right?
Wow.
So different folks are dealing with this in different ways. Androgynous persons, This is also gender expression, I think, right? And you've heard about um, femme presenting, mask presenting. If you go into the world of TikTok, there is all of this and more education going on, right? And I think like earlier, Sarah, like I love how you went through your brain of your curiosity to then be like, actually, it is none of my business. Why am I going exploring there, right? I love that process that you went through. And I think I want to say, sitting with the clients or sitting with the person that you're providing service to, that's not the place for you to go, be curious about it unless you have permission from them. But there are creators on YouTube, there are creators on TikTok who are going to answer these questions for you. And so that is a place, this is something that they have chosen to share with, and then you are welcome to ask them questions and learn more. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna also skip here. If you have questions, please put it in the text, because I do want to get to how do we create safety and belonging. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna go a little quickly about this. So if you think about you yourself and the people, the refugees or the queer folks that you're coming in contact with, right? Like they are who they are, their identity is at the individual level, and they are interacting with their primary community, and primary community can be the refugee resettlement agency and the staff from that and the volunteers from that, right? And then they have their micro community, which is the faith community they may be a part of, or the social group that they may be a part of. And then macro community, as in like religion, government. And part of the reason why it is important for us to kind of spread this out is to think about the influences each of these communities have on us as individual, right? And again, if you are cisgender, if you are following the cultural practices, cultural norms, right? Like if you like, let's use America as an example, right? If you're a cisgender female in America and you're white and you are Christian, right? You have a path that you follow versus a male who is Muslim, who, right, is an immigrant. Like those are different communities that we interact with, and that, and how this communities think about queer folks becomes an issue, becomes a problem unless we explore it, right? Okay, so I'm going to try to show you this video again, and hold on, can I bring this here? Okay, bear with me 1 second.
While Satyam's getting that, I think the other thing about that chart is to look at systems. And there are systems that keep certain things in place where people feel uncomfortable. So how do we sort of make sure the systems are in the right, we're advocates for our clients in those systems.
Okay, let's try this.
My name is Kai Shapley. I'm 12 years old and I shouldn't be here right now. I should be playing with my friends back home in Texas.
No, we could hear it. Now we can't. What happened?
Could you hear anything?
A little bit, but the captions were there, so.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna send this to you. And again, like, so share what you know about why are we having to talk about this? Like, why did people make this video? And here, I'm giving the answer as well. So share what you know about, and if anything your community has done to fight against this.
So I think, I'll just talk about, we mentioned Pride in Mother Tongue. And Pride in Mother Tongue was a group that was created specifically for people to feel their most complete selves in a social setting. And one of the things we talk about in the United States is isolation, and how isolation is actually a health issue. It's a health do they call it a health pandemic? No, they call it something else. Vivek Murphy, the
Surgeon General.
Surgeon General, wrote a book all about isolation, loneliness, and how we live longer if we're not lonely. People can die of loneliness in the sense of being just so cut off from their communities. And I think all of this piece talks to connection, and how do we create connection? Because if you don't feel seen properly as who you authentically are, then you might want to not come out. Satya mentioned coming out. So coming out is really being public with your full identity. And it's something to talk about here too, because confidentiality is an issue. What if you have a refugee who comes out to you, a refugee client that comes out to you, but doesn't want to come out to their caseworker because maybe their caseworker is of the same ethnicity and they're not out in their community? So it's something just to kind of understand sort of the water that we swim in of all these things. And when there's legislation put out there, it's even more. I mean, look at the numbers that Satyam put out there, that 5%. I don't know why there are all these debates and laws about less than 5% of the population, right? You've got to kind of wonder what that question is about. But if that's what someone's seeing, here's a country that I've moved to, and here's the law that they're making, how does that make me feel?
Yeah. And Sarah, since you're the most interactive with us, of these terms that are up on the board, is there anything that you are like, I'm not clear on this?
No, I was just thinking about, because I think we're, kind of coming close to the end, and I was trying to think about what things I wished I knew and what things I wish my community knew. And I do think it is, you're getting there. And so I'm just thinking about it and in the creating welcoming spaces. I think this training so far has been so helpful because when people understand, they're generally more patient, right? If they understand why and how and who, they're more apt to be patient with the things that the parts that they don't understand. So I have volunteers that have worked with clients who have come to the refugees specifically, who have refugee status because they have been persecuted for their social affiliation or their orientation or identity. I find that it is hard to find volunteers to work with refugees in the LGBTQI community, not because I don't have volunteers who would consider themselves allies. It's more that they just don't know how, like what. I think there are oftentimes additional needs above and beyond just what our other clients need, and the helping them sort mail and learn how to, their way around their community and, things like that, because they're coming to the US where they are free for the first time. And so that expression of freedom can be different. And I have had multiple instances where I've had to talk to clients about what's appropriate to say in social settings and inappropriate to say, how loose and open to be. In the same way, I've had to talk to clients about not trauma dumping, right? Like trauma porn, like they'll just, they'll talk about their trauma to someone who has never, that doesn't have a frame of reference for what this client's been through, and then they don't know how to hold what they've been told. And so I'm just thinking about that and how volunteers can be considerate and empathetic and kind and patient and all of these things, and also have some boundaries for themselves of I'm not going to talk to a person about their sex life that I just met.
Yeah.
I'm just not intimate details about that. That's not something I'm going to talk to a refugee who I just met, or even a person that I met at Kroger, So I'm just wondering how to have this tension and balance between being an open, welcoming, comforting, safe space, and also that it's okay to say not everything is okay. Does that make sense?
I'm hearing it. Yep. Yes, I am. And I don't know. I'm
Well,
still
so I think, I would kind of go a little deeper into why people might be feeling uncomfortable. Like, what are all these other things that you might have to provide? Maybe that is part of the conversation, because it's just like, if you have a family with kids, you're going to need to enroll the kids in school, right? Or you're going to need to take that into account. Because kids can take a lot of energy, right? Whereas if it's just two adults and they get a job, and then so there are less things that you have to. So I wonder what it is about someone who might be LGBTQ.
I mean, some examples of we've had people showing pornographic images of themselves to their volunteers. Like, that's just not acceptable in general, right? But I have volunteers that may be like, oh, am I supposed to be okay with this? And that's the way I am loving.
So I think what that comes down to, because that's a very specific thing, right?
Right.
I don't know that it's very common. I don't know, but I would want to kind of get to go a little deeper. Like, what was that person? Were they trying to? What trauma had they been through that they were now bringing into this situation?
Right.
And we often talk to newcomers about, I'm sure I told Alan something the other day. No, it wasn't Alan, actually, it was Joshua. Joshua, okay, he's 6 years old, but he met the principal of the school, and so he went, okay.
Yes.
And we had to
Yes.
go now. So this is a child, so it's very different, but it popped in my
Yes.
like, okay, here, for adults, and that is actually very atypical for a child because most of them adults is very respectful. So there's probably a better example I can come up with. But just to say sort of like maybe when someone gets their job for the first time, you might want to say, oh, when you get a job, you call them Mr. or Mrs. or so and so, whatever. I'm using all the binaries, right? Ms. But you call them by their last name until they tell you you can call them by their first name. So that would be something that is culturally appropriate here, right? We talk about shaking hands, or certainly with Alan, I told her when she was going on a job interview, you look the person in the eye. She went, oh, really? Oh, no, we don't look people in the eye. And I'm like, no, here you need to do that. So I think there's that place, probably you as a volunteer coordinator, when someone approaches you with that kind of thing, there's a space to say, look, I don't feel comfortable with that. Like your sexuality is, I'm not, you can love who you want to love.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. But I feel uncomfortable seeing those pictures.
That's
Satyam,
really
I don't know what thoughts you're coming up with, but I was also going to say that, so that's kind of taking it to one extreme, right? Where the person felt like they could show those pictures, when oftentimes it's the other extreme where they don't feel like they can show anything. And so do you have a rainbow flag somewhere? Do you have something in your language in what you're talking about where you talk about two moms, or you have books that you put out where they feel like, oh, I can be safe here?
Love that. Yeah, because another example that came to my mind was another client who went by Delicious. That was their preferred name, but wanted to remain confidential their orientation. And I was like, we can do that, but in America, like, if you want me to introduce you as Delicious, that's going to imply and lead to questions. Are you comfortable saying I don't want to answer that question? Or, so it's just like kind of talking through, like, you want to present as cisgendered heterosexual, and that's but you want it was just, I don't know, I find that my experience with clients is that they're just trying to figure it out. They're tasting freedom and also have been persecuted. And so they're just trying to figure out, and I do think, I understand it's, I don't know, patronizing might not be the right word, but to compare children to adult clients. But I do think there is a resemblance there of like how children sometimes will push the boundary way, like those barrel through a step way over to try to they overcompensate in their nervousness or in their just not sure. And so they're like, let me try this. And then you're like, whoa, let's back it up a few steps. So I just want to empower volunteers to like, yes, I think you're saying both directions, right? I love that. We need language that shows that we are allies and that this is a safe space. And I'm gonna have to take that and process how I can implement that. I love that. I have rainbow stuff in my home. My children are just now getting to the age where they may know themselves what their orientation is because they're hitting puberty. But I always wanted there to be a safe space in the event that that is what they discovered. But I haven't thought about transitioning that into my workspace, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. So yeah, how to have boundaries and how to also be welcoming and create that whole creating a safe space was a part of this, when your description, that I was very interested in.
Yeah. I think what I would also offer for that piece is, if I'm saying you, but not you, a general you, if you're feeling uncomfortable with this, right? I would really like, especially because you work with volunteers, I would really, and they have the confidence in you to bring it back to you. I would love to push that person and say, tell me what is the message that's bugging you, right? Because the reason why you're uncomfortable with it is because you have been told women should do a certain thing, women should be this way. Religion tells us marriage is only between man and woman. what it is pushing up against is the value system that you grew up with, which more than likely was extremely heteronormative, right? All male, women, male, female, and what women are supposed to do and what men are supposed to do, what you're supposed to be. All these supposed to things are the values that are going to get in your way, right? Yeah, and the part where you shared about the person sharing their naked body, that seems quite out of characteristic for queer people in general. But there is a what is it, not misconception where people have equated being gay to being pedophile, and that is a really terrible conflating of two very different things, right?
Yeah.
Like like yes, anyway.
Well, also in gay communities, sometimes in queer communities, there is sometimes a lot of sexuality brought up.
Yeah.
Right. So if you go to Pride with your family, and someone's wearing this like very small little piece of material on their body, and you've got a 5-year-old and you don't really want that, so Pride has become much more family oriented, but sometimes there is a sexuality aspect to it. And not everybody likes that. Right. So I think it does go back to sort of like I think, Satyam, that's a great question. Like, what did that bring up for you? And why, what is it that made you feel uncomfortable about that? And that's a mix of, let's talk to this person. So you want your name to be, or you want to, not your name to be, you want to be, you're referred to as delicious. Okay. That's fine. That's great. Here in the United States, people might react a certain way to that. I'm not going to tell you not to use that name. I'm just going to tell you how that comes across. Just because you're saying delicious, I mean, how many girls do we know called princess, right? The Liberian names always I found interesting, like baby boy. Okay, baby boy is 54 years old, right? Or Gorbachev was also a very popular Liberian name. So that is kind of the thing with names anyway. So how does that name fit? Like I love the name Delicious. That makes me smile. And just be prepared that sometimes some people might think this because you say your name's Delicious, but that's fine. But you need to be prepared. And I think that's our role as cultural, easing people in for what works with our culture and pushing up against what works with our culture.
Yes.
Sometimes what works with our culture is actually, you've got rainbow flags in your house with children. Well, I don't know. Some people might say that's not okay. So making sure that we're also questioning the normativity of it, because that normativity came from a place of, like you said, patriarchy, right? It came from a place where we weren't allowed to be open as we are. And now we can. I mean, I once had a job, and I'm not that old, where I had to wear a skirt to work. And I didn't wear a skirt, and I got in trouble. I got written up for insubordination. Can you believe it? Because I wore a skirt. Now we've come a long way, baby. But have we? Because it's the skirt, but now it's something else. So I think, Sarah, I know we have to end, but I do want to say thank you to you, because you have taken this leap, which is a really, really big deal. And I know that your nationals are planning to do this down the road. And I want to just give you a lot of kudos that we call June Pride Month. And Pride is all about being proud of who you are in your whole entirety. And you have just said, I want everybody to be proud. I want my volunteers to be proud of how accepting they are. I want my volunteers to be proud if they're LGBTQ. I want the refugees that we're working with to be proud. So I am proud, if that's an okay term for you, Satyam, I know I've been talking and I'll hand it over to you, but I'm really, really grateful, Sarah, that you're bringing this into the space and you're going to have this video for folks. And I encourage questions to continue coming up, and I'm happy to talk with you about those.
Absolutely. Ditto everything you said. And yes, please feel free to reach out to us with, questions about resources for clients, or as you work with your volunteers who work with clients and things come up, please feel free to reach out. We are always happy to kind of problem solve on one-on-one basis, because that's where the problem solving comes, right? So yeah, thank you again so much.
Thank you. You guys have given me, and I hope anyone who watches this, some really practical tools. And that was really what I was hoping for, right? And so my takeaways from this so far are that in a lot of ways, when a volunteer is going to be paired with someone who specifically has come to the US as a refugee because of their social affiliation or because of their persecution for social affiliation, in some ways, they don't need to ask, they don't have to ask, they can in a lot of ways, it's as though it's as any other client that they interact with. They're going to be providing the same services, the same orientation, the same interactions, the same, cultural orientation and things like that. And they can and should ask pronouns, a preference, there are certain things that they can do to be respectful. And then in the way that I found some of our clients have higher needs, and that might be by culture. Some of our cultures, we just know, have higher needs. Some of, some of your social affiliation sometimes have higher needs. And so it just takes an extra level of patience, flexibility, adaptability. And I think what the takeaway for me is that it is acceptable to create the same boundaries that I would create with, let's say, a Muslim man who is interested in physical contact, with me, because that's not something that's acceptable in his culture. And he's seeking that out in this culture. And I might be like, nope, no, like, I'm not comfortable with that.
Well, any refugee, right?
Yes.
Male, yeah, we may have had those
Cross-gender,
circumstances.
with the cross-gender touching. And so like, I think what has been helpful for me is to say, okay, I can apply the same boundaries that I would want my volunteers to apply across the board. If there's something that makes you uncomfortable, it's okay to say, that's not comfortable for me. And empower them to say that, and then also maybe offer some cultural orientation around it. Here's why.
I also want to say that there are resources out there that in every one of your communities, there is, like at the high school, there might be a gay straight alliance, right? If we're talking a younger person, there are groups everywhere in small little towns, in bigger towns, in Savannah, definitely. And so if you need to connect someone to, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a gay space that they go to, but it might be, let's say they want to go to church. They might want to go to their specific church, but they might not. And they could go to a church that is affirming. And we can always help you find those places if you can't find those places. And if they really love to play the guitar, there's probably a place that plays, you could go play the guitar and it is welcoming and affirming. And so we don't have to think of things only that way, right? You don't only have to go to the African grocery store. You could shop at the regular one and the African one. Well, you can also go play your guitar and go to, so it's the whole menu of things.
That's really good, Leanne. Thank you guys for your time. And I feel like I could sit and talk to you for 2 more hours plus.
Hey,
thank you, Musa. Musa, I'm glad you stayed and hopefully gained something from this. We're glad you were here.
Yeah, and I did get some emails during the session of people that were unable to attend that had registered and are looking forward to the recording. So I know that we'll be sharing this with other people, and your contact information is on the slide that you'll share, as well as mine. And so I look forward to having a continued conversation with others who weren't able to join tonight.
We do have a little survey that we will send to you that you're welcome to send to others if they watch the video and they want to give us feedback. We're happy to incorporate that as well.
I love that. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you.
You as well.
Thanks
Bye.
so much. Bye.